Welcome back, or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Glicini. In this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their life with the pursuit of greatness in mind. And this platform provides me with the privilege of discussing and explaining strategies that go into peak performance. This is episode number 2. My guest, Anka Tezcan. He's a top 5% Ironman triathlete for his age group, 25 to 29 years old. He lives a life devoted to peak performance and has remained my best friend for well over a decade. He invests more time and diligence to his training and recovery in a single day than most individuals do in weeks. Intense, yet always kind. Intentionally different, yet extremely empathetic. Anka chases greatness daily. His integrity is rare. His love and loyalty to his family and friends are contagious. His self-discipline and search for self-discovery drive those who know him to lean into discomfort too. I don't know everything, but I'm certain this talk with him will catalyze and inspire at least one listener. Anka, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that introduction. For those of you that don't know, I just want to mention that Mark brought me into this tidal wave of peak performance. He taught me how to use the weight room when we were in high school. He gave me my first sports psychology book, and it's only grown since there. So who I am today is very much in thanks to Mark. So
I appreciate that, man. I really do. And I know when I told people that you were going to be my second guest, people that did know you and people that are close to me and know how influential you've been in my life, they were very excited for this one. So on my first episode, the conversation circled around the phrase, be the one. Be the one to take the road less traveled. Be the one to search for your own potential. Be the one who's okay with not following the crowd. You, Anka, have certainly done that. So I'd like to start with your why. What influences you and why do you train the way you do?
Well, I think you kind of mentioned it in your question. One thing that drives me a lot is the idea of potential. I think that most of us, mostly everyone in life, we often limit ourselves in what we allow ourselves to believe what we can do. But once we realize that more exists out there for us and we begin to realize even just a part of that potential, we gain momentum and it becomes contagious. And so what drives me a lot is helping others see what's possible for them, and I feel like the way I can do that is showing them that what's possible.
Yeah, I love that. And would you say that there were particular inflection points, whether it was when you were a little boy or your middle school, or is there any specific years that you can look back and we're like, wow, that's when I really started thinking differently, and having the perspective that peak performance matters to you?
I think when we were in high school, when we became best friends, that's when I first started chasing a dream of playing soccer, and when I got super involved in training and the idea that the more work we put in, the more success we'll get from it. And so I'd say that was the first inflection point in my life. And the second one was probably when I started training for Ironman.
Yeah, so we'll get really deeply into that. I'm sure that's probably what, from the introduction, people want to hear most about. But knowing you, you've had a lot of different sources that have come into your environment, changed your environment, that you purposefully go out of the way to make a part of your environment. And you and I talk a lot about having a vision and the role of visualization in our lives. When would you say you started picturing and visualizing the future version of yourself? Was that in high school as well, or did you not pick that up until later on?
It definitely started in high school, but I don't think I knew well enough how to visualize properly. I think when we were in high school, I saw much more the end result and the outcome of what I wanted to happen. And even though I was focusing on getting there, now I much more focus on the process, and I visualize much smaller goals. I have the big goal in mind, but I see all the steps on the way to that goal, and I think that helps a lot in terms of, milestones in the journey.
Absolutely. I think 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, in that book, it talks about beginning with the end in mind. And there's a lot of good tidbits in that book, but I think that's one is the most important, because you have this journey that you're going through life, and everybody talks about where they want to be, but not too specifically, and not having a clear vision. And you've always kept me on track ever since we became close in having a clear vision for yourself. And I always say, why don't you have a clear vision of who you want to be, but also raise your rock bottom, right? Because people wait to hit rock bottom until they have change, and change isn't inevitable. Change is inevitable, but improvement isn't, right? And if you begin with the end in mind and have a clear vision for yourself, that's where it all gets started, raising your rock bottom and then searching for something. So tell us a little bit more about our relationship and how it's evolved in your opinion, and a little tidbits about what goes into our lives and why we do what we do.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Well, I mentioned in the beginning that Mark showed me the weight room at first, but that shows none of the picture. For the first 3 years I spent in the gym, every single workout that I did was mimicking the workout that Mark was doing, just, with less weights or, less time or whatever. But so the first 3 years that we were friends, any workout I did was following him. And I think that really laid the foundation for when I went to school and went to college, and afterwards I was able to navigate, my way around athletics in general and understand how to improve. And so that was solely thanks to him.
And that's huge. I think when I was first met him, and just to give the background story, I was in chemistry class, sophomore year, subject that I was struggling at, and I had the diligence in all my other classes to keep my grades up. And this young man was sitting next to me, and I looked over him and I said, "Hey man, you get this, and I don't. Can you help me out?" And he asked me to show him the weight room. Funny enough, he already had known about me, and that's how it worked out. Our first hangout, if you will, was him showing me how to do chemistry, and then him coming into the weight room with me, and finding ways to get better that way. And the story I'd love to tell about Anka is I asked him to do a handstand till failure. I often ask people that I work out with to do handstands or pull-ups, because I think they're metaphorical for life, pulling yourself up or holding yourself up, because you can't be too dependent on others. And funny enough, he starts going. I said, "That's good, man. That's enough." He's wobbling and everything, and sure enough, he passes out during a handstand, falls over, shatters the mirror. You remember this? Clear as day, right?
And I think if you're listening, I owe a huge thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Glicini for allowing me to come back to your house after that.
He just shattered the whole thing, and he looks up with me with these wide eyes, and like he's fogged out of his mind. And I knew right then and there. We always talk about the process, but right then and there, and then in one moment, that he was going to be my best friend, because he was willing to go that far, and then he's come such a far way since then. But not just in the weight room, but what he did at Dartmouth, and what he's doing now as an Ironman athlete. So you're an Ironman athlete, and I want to ask you balance. It's not really something that most people would assimilate with the word Ironman or training for long hours. So with how hard you work out, balance seems to be a word that wouldn't come to mind when I think of you, but it does. So how do you manage your work, your training, and your relationships?
Well, I think that's something that has evolved over the past couple years. I think the first year when I was training for Ironman, I was definitely not balanced. I thought that I had to get all my workouts done before I went to work, and so I'd be up, around 3:30 in the morning to get all my workouts done, then go to work, then come home and, fall asleep early, but still not get enough recovery for the next day. And so those 6 months in particular were very tough, just because I was just trying to find my way through something I had no idea about. And since then, I think I've been able to develop a better schedule. So, now I'll do a workout before work, take a lunch, do one during my lunch break, and one after work. And that allows me, not just time to decompress if it's a stressful day, but allows me to get, a good amount of sleep each night, and also, have relationships with my friends, go out to dinner, kind of do whatever I want. The only stuff that I don't do that much of is, watch TV or, go out till early hours in the morning. But
yeah, so it's pretty clear that you still have or still find the time by being schedule oriented. There's I guess a dichotomy between discipline and freedom. Jocko Willich talks about it, but most people think that they'll have more freedom if they don't not too scheduled, right? But that's kind of the complete opposite idea. If you have more schedule in your life and you're willing to get things done during a specific time frame, then when you're done with your chores or your work, then you'll have more time to invest in your quality of your relationships, or how you want to with your hobbies and whatnot. I want you to dive a little bit into your parents, who have become kind of like parents to me. So inspirational. You can dive into what you do for work, what your dad does for work, and I said early in the introduction how important it was that you're such an intense dude, but yet so kind, right? And that's rare, right? You have to shut that off, that kind of intense person. But tell me about those influences.
Well, there was a quote I heard you say on your last podcast that resonated with me, and I think it went something like, "You teach what you know, but you reproduce who you are."
Yeah.
And so when you say those things, I'm happy, that you think of me in that way. But, anything that you think is just reflections of them. And so, my dad is the hardest working person I know, and I watched him, as I was going throughout my life, work long weeks, work weekends, and once I got into soccer, he would come home from work and then he would play with me for a couple hours before even having dinner, and so
incredible.
So when you're talking about hard working, people might think that I work hard, but it's nowhere near, what he does. And what I've seen him do. And when you talk about kindness, I would say that my mom is the most kind and loving, caring person in the world. So all I try to do is, emulate them in my everyday life.
Right, and then something I think about often, and I try to project on others, is that emulate until you can innovate, right? And wait to innovate, right? Because people have the systems, they have the routines, they do things very well and at a high level. And I would say that that's true about Anka's parents. He has really good guidance. He's never given steadfast rules to follow, but he's given he's hand-holded to a certain extent. But human beings, we listen to guidelines, not rules. Right, and if you're more pushy on other people, they're more resistant, and they develop a vengeance that they want to get back on against your rules. But if you have that guidance, it's kind of pulley, right? And I think that's what you're getting at when you talk about your parents.
Yeah, exactly. And also something I've realized over the past couple of years, I definitely didn't know it my whole life growing up, is my parents worked really hard to make sure that I was, comfortable growing up, that I would have a chance or the opportunity to, do what I wanted to do and to chase any dream that I had, but they never forced any dream upon me. And so as I've gotten older, it's been awesome just to understand, that support that they've, given me. And it's something that definitely drives me, through tough workouts, is to just remember, that they're always going to be there and they've always been there to kind of hold me up.
Absolutely. And I think, not without getting too much into developmental stages, if I was to just define it or sum it up pretty quickly, it's just important to be loved early on, right? Not push in any direction, and then once you get to that next stage of life, when you're mature enough, then you're given some objectives. Do things well, both as a student, as an athlete, or whatever club or activity that you're in, and then after that, you can be a little bit more deliberate, right? And teaching technique and teaching strategies that hopefully we're talking about here. You brought up before, kind of doing great things. The reason I've thought about it is because you were talking about your dad working throughout the week and then on weekends. Everybody sees a kind, intense, incredible man, but you don't, once you take a peek under the covers, if you will, you see a person that's working long hours, and not everybody sees that. And people think that these things are impossible, but they're not really impossible. So what piece of advice would you give to someone who, in his or her mind, is taking on a quote-unquote impossible goal?
I think the most important thing to do is to break it down and take it one step at a time. Because once you take the first step towards it, even though you might feel infinitely far away, you're one step closer, and that builds a little bit of momentum. And I think momentum is probably the most important thing that we might talk about on this podcast. Just the idea that the more steps you take, the easier it is to take the next step. And so what might seem like an insurmountable goal, once broken down to a bunch of steps, and once you start following those steps, then you realize, as long as I keep doing this, I'll get there. And it might be a long while till you get there, but you'll get there, and you have the ability to take the next step.
Right. And I talk about a staircase to greatness, and in that first step, before you even take it and learn how to do something, you got to start with your own why. Why are you even taking this staircase to greatness? Are you doing it for your family? Are you doing it for yourself? Hopefully it's for others, because you only go so far when it's for yourself. But you start with a why. You really write that down either in your journal, or you do some sort of brain dump to kind of understand what it is inside your heart, that passion that's going to motivate you. And then every staircase along the way to greatness is finding people like you in my life, like mentors that I have, like coaches that I've had, like my parents, and then influential friends and peers, or just looking up incredible peak performers and following and knowing that success leaves clues. I figure out the how, and every step is how. How am I going to do this stage of my life well? How am I going to improve myself here? Whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, how. And I think as a society, we focus a little bit too much on the what. Oh, you're a jerk, or oh, you're great, and that will change, and that will always change. And you always have to take the what's in life, if you will, with a grain of salt, and then keep your head down and keep focusing on the how. Because if you get too caught up in what people are calling you, then you can't really focus on your vision like we talked about earlier. Switch gears a little bit. What do you use for mental training? Are there books, podcasts, or are there anything that you really dive into that you find to be repeatedly helpful?
Well, definitely. There's a few books that I go back to a lot to read through for the mental aspect of the game. One of them is the first book that you gave me that I mentioned. It's called Mind Gym, and it's just a wealth of knowledge.
And quick read, right?
Yeah.
3 to 5 page chapters. You can almost just read it when you're sitting down for 5 minutes.
Exactly. And it anyone who's interested in the mental aspect of sports, you could read that book and you have just a much better idea of what it is and what you're getting into. A couple other ones, the Champion's Mind or the Motivation Manifesto. The Champion's Mind for me is just it looks at a lot of world-class athletes and their mindset going into their training or their sports, and a lot of it is you train how you want to perform. So you sink to your levels of training. You don't rise to the occasion. And so if you put in all the work and train with purpose, then when it comes to the time to perform, you don't have to think. You do it automatically. So that was my biggest takeaway from that book. I think Motivation Manifesto, that's a lot more just if you're looking for some motivation to just push you through a day or push you through a workout or a week or whatever it is, like that book is just full of diamonds.
Yes, and will definitely spark if you're looking for one, for sure. And you talked about right there that how like you train the same way you want to compete, and I've seen you during your long hours on the bike, and then during those times when you need to set a new threshold, and you're cooking and you're foaming at the mouth like a rabid dog, and you do it until you pass out, so you set this new threshold, and there's something really admirable about that and really really contagious. So I just want to say, just by hanging out with you, that's been a common theme for as long as I've known you, is that there's something contagious about your energy by how far you're willing to go. How do you turn it off when you go that hard? Then your downtime starts. How do you turn it off? Are there hobbies? Are there things that you turn to when you're not being go into peak performance?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first, I want to say that your energy is contagious as well. I think all of us who know you and hang out with you, we'll leave hanging out with you and want to be a better version of ourselves just, from the energy you give off. I find it. I mean, we talk about flipping a switch, and I find that I can flip it on and off much easier now than I used to. Working out, when I'm working out, I'm in one type of zone, but as soon as I leave that arena, whether it's the trainer or the pool, or I take off my running shoes, it's I can grab a book and calm down, or meditate and relax and calm down. So also it's a lot easier because after a day full of workouts, all you really want to do is go to bed.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. But goal setting, planning, scheduling, you're very very good at that. Is your downtime scheduled? Is that something you would say, or is it kind of like, wow, I just cooked so hard during that workout, I really need to relax? Or how do you figure out when you're going to flip it on, when you're going to turn it off, and when you're going to flip it on again?
So I don't necessarily schedule my downtime, but I schedule all the priorities in my life. So all the things I have to do, my training, my work, time to write, and time to read, and everything outside of that, I kind of just do whatever I want to do in that moment. A lot of the time, that's just writing or reading anyway, or hang out with friends. But I don't, the time outside of work and training is, for me, it's fun. It's just leisure.
Right. And you said prioritize. I think that's so important, right? Because even if you do not have a routine schedule, but you make things that are important urgent, and then you things that are not urgent, you just leave to the wayside. Prioritize is really important. Things I like to say are the power of these three words: visualize, prioritize, and then emphasize. I love the emphasis button on the iMessage. That's something I always do because I want them to get jolted and go to a volume or a place that they've never been, right? In this war against average. I don't want average, right? So I'm a big emphasis guy on an iMessage. But those three words: visualize, prioritize, emphasize. Wherever you go, you want to emphasize things. You want the energy to be contagious. I talk about it with Doc Gilbert, who's one of my mentors. He talks about the word Shakti Pod, exchange of energy. And it's really, really little about the content in which you're talking about. And it has a lot to do with how you present yourself and your presence there. And a really quick little tangent is I was taking a master class from Chris Voss, who's a FBI investigator or hostage negotiator. I'm sorry. And what he talks about is this rule 7-38-55 rule, and 7% of it is the content in which you talk about. 38 is your tonality, the inflection in your voice, and whether you get loud or how you deliver it, and then 55% is body language. So it goes to show that there's no replacement for a in-person interaction, because your body language is really what matters. I think how you say something is really, really important, whether it's sarcastic or whether it's demeaning or really, really excitable, right? So it really has less to do with the content and a lot more to do with how you deliver it. So
yeah, and I just want to say, I think the most important thing to take away there is that energy is contagious. You know, the environment that we're in, the people we surround ourselves with, have so much influence over our everyday lives, and much more than we probably give it credit for. You know, if you're going into work and people are just hunched over and depressed, you're not going to feel as good as if you go into work and everybody's looking up, shoulders back, smiling at you, asking how your day is, or telling you have a great day. It's just such a small difference, maybe 30 seconds as you walk in the morning can change your whole day. And so I think that, it's just the environment that we allow ourselves to be surrounded by, because, we may not get to choose our coworkers, we get to choose our friends, who, the people we want to hang out with is really important. And
right. While you were saying that first 30 seconds of work, I'm just thinking about that perky individual that's doing it like unauthentically. Everybody has that person in the workplace where they're just like, oh, good morning, blah, blah, blah. And then that they gas out because it's not authentically them, and they're just faking it because they just had a cup of coffee or something like that. So that takes me into my next point, or question that I wanted to ask you is, you and I love Jordan B. Peterson's work, clinical psychologist. And one of his rules is set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. I truly believe that. And you can have a greater impact and positive impact on others when you build your own mind, body, and craft first. So how do you go about being authentic, and do you really believe that it's important to set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world?
It's a good question. I mean, I definitely believe in authenticity, because if you are inauthentic, eventually either you're gonna feel trapped because you can't be yourself, or you're gonna explode. And so the best way to live your life is to just be you. And I also agree with to set your house in order first. You want, another saying is, before you try to go out and change the world, you have to change yourself.
Sure.
And so it's it's about doing whatever you can to
remain yourself, but also take people to the next level. And
Exactly.
I don't think you can take people to the next level until you take yourself to the next level, right? And,
Exactly.
People are more willing to follow you if you're willing to set a path that's really authentic and well done. Ank, you've been like a brother to me for a long time. I always tell people how it seems like you love me and your family more than you love yourself, and you're always willing to do what's best for me and others. It's crazy, but why do you care so much about other people's happiness? Have you always been like that? Is it because you have people like your mother that are so kind, or why do you go so far for others?
I've never really thought about that. I like seeing other people happy, I guess. I mean, the way we experience joy, I feel like, is in connection with others. And so if you're sad, I'm going to feel that sadness. So I want to do whatever I can to make you happy, so that we can experience like happiness together. I'm very happy with myself because of going through this process of getting better and doing whatever I can to reach my potential for the day. So that's not something I ever really worry about or think about. And so I just want to be able to experience that happiness with everyone around me.
Awesome. And it's funny you used what you think about. You never really think about making other people's happy. It's something that you just do. Other friends and family ask me, what does Anka think about when he's doing that long run, or he's in the middle of that triathlon? What would you say to those people that are like, I could never do an Ironman or a triathlon or a marathon because I get bored, right? And I hear that often. Like, I'm running on the treadmill for 10 minutes and I get bored. I can't do it. So what do you think about, or do you not think about at all when you're in your race?
It's all different stuff. It depends on the day. I mean, during training, I definitely think my mind wanders a lot more than during the race. During the race, I have specific goals, and I'm kind of pushing the threshold of my physical ability, and so I'm just focusing on my breath and my form and executing, the race I want to execute. During training, I'm still trying to train like I'm racing, so I'm trying to focus on my form. I'm trying to get myself to where I need to be, but especially during like recovery days or where don't have to go as hard, I'm just trying to do a less intense workout. My mind will wander and I'll think about, maybe my goals, or I'll think about, what I'm writing about, or what we want to send in our next, virtual vitamin that we send out. So my mind definitely wanders all over the place. Music helps a lot on the treadmill. For people who say that they get bored on the treadmill, I'd say you're just not listening to the right music.
I think it is a momentous endeavor. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, and you got to find out what works for you, right? I've heard a lot of people like, oh, music's good for the first portion of a race, and then you have to change to a podcast, never listen to the same thing too much. But really, it's going to take time for you to have, you get to that place where your mind does wander. I remember when I'm coming back from injury and I'm trying to get my cardio back up, when I'm trying to go for a mile or a 5K, I'm like, how long is that? How much do I have left? And that's where the devil creeps in your mind, right? Where it's just like, well, I have a quarter mile left, and I remember back in high school, that's one time around the track, and I can picture it, and that's just that's the worst thing, because then you're just sitting there like, wow, that's like a quarter mile could feel like an entire marathon all over again. So to get to that place where your mind is wandering, you do need to focus on your breath. And if you have to take 100 steps, you're going to take one step 100 times, right? And sometimes when I'm looking at the treadmill, I can't even look at the numbers anymore. I have to look down at my feet, and I just count 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, or 1, 2, and just break it down into those small little chunks. Is that something that you do?
Oh, definitely. I'll focus on my breath a lot, just to get my mind back into like neutral. If I start thinking about how much is left, that's a cue that I need to come back into some sort of zone, because I want to finish the workout and be surprised that it's over. Also, the other thing that I just want to mention is, we're talking a lot. You're talking about, people say, I could never do that. I could never do an Ironman. One, if you want to and you have the right reasons, like, you always could. But I wouldn't expect anyone to do it. I think that it's like this talk is just a metaphor for all the other endeavors that people have in their lives. Everyone's passionate about something different, and the whole idea is that as long as you don't give up and you put in the work and you follow the right strategy, you can achieve whatever it is that gets you out of bed. It doesn't have to be a workout or an Ironman. It's just whatever it is.
Well, let's go there, because as long as I've known you, you didn't love Ironman and triathlons when I met you. So tell people, how did that happen? Like, when did you become, because you played semi-professional lacrosse in overseas in Switzerland. Soccer. Sorry, I'm a lacrosse player. Soccer overseas, and you did that for a few years, and then you got into this. So tell us that story. How did that happen?
Well, it didn't start when I was injured, but I got injured. I got tendonitis in my foot while I was playing soccer, and I made the decision to stop playing. And then while I was rehabilitating, I was just kind of finding different mini goals to to achieve. So it might be a certain amount of push-ups in a day, or just these random things to keep my body and mind occupied. And then you gave me a book. I think it was by Don Mann. And in the book, it had just mentioned this thing called the Ironman triathlon. And I didn't really know about it. I just knew it seemed, really cool. It seemed like very tough. And it just seemed like a great challenge. And so I thought about it, and it was running through my head for a couple months. And then, I don't know, I had a conversation one day with a few friends, a few good friends, and I mentioned Ironman, and I guess the word impossible got thrown around, which I guess it's
you hate that word.
Shouldn't be a word. But so right after that, on the ride home, I just wondered to myself what it would take to do one. I came home, I looked up like a training plan, and I guess super luckily there was a 12-week training plan to run an Ironman. I looked up Ironman races, and there was one exactly 12 weeks away, or a half Ironman race was 12 weeks away. And so when stuff like that happens, I think you just have to, I signed up on the spot and then decided I'd figure it out as I went.
And I wrote it down right there because I'm constantly learning from you. You got into Ironman because it seemed cool and it seemed like a tough challenge, and you wanted to find that other version of yourself. And that's really what the whole life's all about, is constant growth and what's on the other side if I go attack that fear or that challenge or that whatever, right? And you have to set something like that, because if you're not setting those goals, even if they seem crazy and you have to go swim and bike and run for miles, they're worth it, right? So what have you found out about yourself during this triathlons and during these races, or just preparing and training for them? What's sort of, is there self-discovery in it, or is it more the rush and the high of finishing one of those races?
I mean, there's definitely a high in finishing a race, especially like the first Ironman, but I think all the benefit and all the most beautiful parts were in the journey towards a race, or journey towards the first Ironman. Everyone sees the one day, or that one day you do it, but there's months and months and months of work, and there's you'll get your highest highs and your lowest lows during training and everything in between. And you realize through training what you're capable of, and race day is just an extension of that.
Right.
But really you're discovering, or I discovered during training, all these limits that I thought that I had. It's in our minds. We kind of it's an excuse not to do more.
Right. And it takes a while, right, to get to that place where you're like, okay, this is a chore. I don't like doing it. And then after, I don't know how long it is, but you do cross that magical bridge where you have a desire to do something, right? And it's no more of having the discipline to eat right and to do right, and I got to do this. You get to do it, and you want to do it, right? And it takes a while to do that. And I was thinking about what you were saying. People just love that race day where they can go see Anka do his race. And I think about Diana Nyad and how she swam from Cuba to Florida. And people were like, oh, I was tracking you on that thing, that 56, 59 hours. When are you going to do it again? And she's like, well, you haven't been there for the years and the intense hours I've been in the pool. And if anybody's listening to this, you can go listen to her amazing TED Talk, Never Ever Give Up. And she talks about that swim, and through all the difficulties and challenges and failing quite a few times, she's able to accomplish it.
Yeah, and I think, like, you bringing that reminded me, one of the biggest things that's happened over the course of training, and I think you probably feel this way as well over the course of just getting more experience and deeper into lacrosse and mental training, is you begin to find inspiration in everything. You, like, watching Diana Nyad do that swim, or watching anybody doing anything out of their comfort zone, really, you just take that with you, like, for the day, or through the next workout or whatever it is, because the fact that that person is pushing themselves past what they thought they could do, or what anyone's done before. It doesn't matter if it's in your sport or if it's, or if it's someone who memorized pi to like a longer amount of digits. It's just the fact that they did it and they went through the process of doing that is inspiring. So I think that, being able to see that and draw from that has been a huge, benefit through the course of training.
And I would completely agree with you, because there is, even when I wake up every day, I search for, okay, what's going to keep my spark alive? What negative or positive thing in my life could I add as fuel on the fire? I look at, I've heard the story of Emmitt Smith. After he won a Super Bowl, he said the only time he rested was between reps 3 and 4 of benching 315, and then he kept going. And then I listened to the 7 or 8 minute interview with Conor McGregor last night, or the other night, where he talks about, I'm going to celebrate tonight, and then it's back in the gym. How do you do that? How do you pick yourself up from the bootstraps after you're sore, you can barely walk after one of those triathlons, those Ironman? How do you pick yourself back up and say, that's something I want to do again, even though I can't walk down the stairs right now?
I think that all goes into being in love with the journey and the process of getting better. If I'm outcome oriented, or if you're outcome oriented, I think maybe you finish the race and it's all good. But most people, they'll finish whatever it is, and it's the process of getting there that is so appealing and so is so enjoyable. So it's not, the race might be over, but the journey's not over. You're just you want to do it again.
Right. You
want to continue.
Right. Like a couple months ago, I had a bad stint where I just kept repeatedly getting injured, physically, and then one time emotionally. And then you sit there, you're like, when is this going to end? And the answer to that is never, right? And
exactly.
Everybody wants to know come on, give me something. Give me something in this talk. Give me something in this movie, this drama film. Give me something in this podcast, this book that I'm going to read or consume, and then I'm going to go. And I'll just go and I won't look back. And that's just that's not how it works. You have to love the journey. And I think if there's one thing you can take away is, if you love the journey and you're willing to take the first step and the second and find momentum, the most powerful thing in the world, then you'd really surprise yourself with what's going to happen, right?
I mean, 100%. I completely agree with that. And I don't know why that reminded me of this, but I guess maybe you said, what's going to spark me, and then I'm just going to go. Something that I think about a lot, a quote I think about a lot, goes like, we all live 2 lives. The second one begins when we realize we only have one. And so, to me, that just means sooner or later, everyone realizes that this is like the only chance we get.
Right.
And for some people, it's late in life and they regret not doing all these things that they wish they did.
Sure.
But if we're lucky, that happens, when we're younger, and we begin to chase all these, dreams that we have, because, when else?
When else? And I think right at the beginning, when we started this talk, I said something ridiculous. I said, raise your rock bottom. But you must. You got to raise your rock bottom, because if you do wait for it to get that bad, whatever that is, that threshold, that floor that you're not willing to accept any longer, if you can raise that, and if you're a student, if that means a B- is my floor, raise it to a B+, right? Because I will not accept anything less than that. If you're in the workforce and you're thinking about a compensation or amount of sales or whatever it is, right? You have to be more enthusiastic about your rock bottom, as crazy as that sounds, because the threat of defeat is way more powerful than the opportunity of gain, right? Does somebody cram the night before for something the next day because they want to get an A or they want to pass it with flying colors? Of course not. They just don't want to fail, right? Whether that be a meeting, they have to prepare right before the meeting. Why? So they don't fail. But if it matters to you, if you love the journey enough, you're always preparing. And it's like there's a constancy about that.
Exactly.
Go is something that we were just talking about. just go, whatever that is. You love to travel. You spend time in Europe, like I said before, playing professional soccer. Where does that love for travel come from? And how would you recommend someone getting started who's never really ventured far from home?
I mean, my love for travel definitely came from my dad. He, growing up, did a couple backpacking trips through Europe. He's the one who took me overseas, to Europe, also to Asia. We've been, trekking through the Himalayas together in Nepal, which is some of the best experiences I've had. And
getting lost.
yeah, and getting lost and found.
Go there. Talk to us about that. When you were altitude sickness, you had no idea where you guys were going. It's a great story.
Yeah, I mean, we, against the advice of guides and Sherpas, decided to go to Everest Base Camp, which, like, we trekked there in 3 days, and it's a trip that normally takes about 10 because you have to get used to the altitude. And we trekked back down in 2, which is fine because you could go down as quickly as you want. But because we went up so quickly, we both got altitude sickness. And, I got it in my head. I had a really bad headache. He got it in his lungs. His chest started to fill with liquid. And we left our guides because our guides got altitude sickness and they stayed back.
So smart.
But we, on the bright side, we only had 5 days for the trip, so we made it to Everest Base Camp, and it was great. We spent some time up there together. And on the way down, it had snowed, and we left early morning, from one lodge, and all the tracks to, down where we're supposed to go were covered. And we ended up taking the wrong path, or taking a wrong way. We were walking on a frozen river, we found out. And about 45 minutes, an hour later, we realized we were just completely lost. Luckily, as I do, did most of my life, I just followed my dad, and he followed his instincts, and he was able to get us back to, back to safety.
I think that's like incredible story. As easy as that might have sounded, I just followed my dad. You were close, to not coming back, or things could have gotten worse.
Oh no, definitely. And I guess for me, there are a bunch of ridiculous experiences that I've had with him in Nepal. So, and he's always, he always managed to find our way out of it.
Find a way.
And so, it was super easy for me to just put, complete trust in him. Just like I put complete trust in you, growing up through all the workouts, through high school. Sometimes I just find someone who knows more and follow him.
Right.
But to go back to traveling, I think that the reason I find traveling so beautiful is it opens your mind to, different possibilities in the world. You meet you see all these different cultures and meet all these different people, and you see that although everybody lives, they live differently, we're all the same in in important ways. We all love, we all are striving towards a goal, whether it doesn't matter where you are. We all have these same things, but it gives you better perspective, I think. The most important thing I would say in reference to traveling is, you don't have to wait until you have someone to go with. I've done enough traveling by myself, and that's been beautiful as well. And so if you're not traveling because no one wants to travel, just pick a place and go to it. You always figure it out.
You always figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? And because there's no other way, right? And that right there is one strategy on how to raise your rock bottom, by just going somewhere yourself, because you're not going to have Google Maps or a tour guide to help your way out of it. You've always found a way, and something you've been really great at is that emulate until you can innovate. In order to be a great leader, you got to be a great follower first. You got to learn how to listen and you have something that Dr. Ellen Winter calls it a rage to master, where it's this drive and curiosity to learn. Do you think that's more with your personality, or that's developed over time as something that you've done with your attitude?
I think that it's probably developed. I think the more I've realized like the importance of learning and how you know how analogous learning is to growth, and how then the more I want to learn. It's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and so it's definitely grown. I think Rage the Master also has to do with like it's like deep dives into certain things. There are a lot of things that I'm interested about that I'll do quick dives into, but there are definitely certain things like sports psychology, now triathlon, these different sports and triathlon that I feel like I do have a Rage the Master just because I love it so much.
Right. And there's something to be said for a hunter-gatherer of information, being greedy with information, wanting to learn and be willing to there's such a great power in listening and being willing and eager to learn. I want to bring up a specific story because I think it encompasses you a lot, and regardless if it embarrasses you, that's okay with me. But you were in Middlebury, Connecticut. You were doing a half Ironman, and something went completely wrong. Take us on that journey with you.
Yeah, so I was doing a half Ironman last year. It was in June in Connecticut, and so a half Ironman is a 1.2 mile swim, a 56-mile bike, and then a 13-mile run. And so about halfway through the bike, I had a mechanical issue, and I couldn't ride my bike anymore. And so I was kind of left with the choice of stopping the race and, calling it a day. Or, I asked one of the, assistants on the field if I can just run with my bike. And they didn't have an answer, so then I took that as they don't know, so it's okay. So I ended up running with my bike for 22 miles, but for me, I mean, it was beautiful for me in two ways. The first way is that 18 miles into that run, because bike shoes are clip-ins, you can't run in them. I'd be super uncomfortable. And so
you're running barefoot.
Yeah, so I was running in socks, and then the socks, on the bottom shedded away, so it became mostly barefoot. And so my feet were in a lot of pain. I was trying to find a way through that. And it just so happened on the road, a guy saw me running with the bike, and he lived down the road. He called his wife, Trish, and he asked her to bring out a pair of shoes for this guy running with his bicycle. And I had no idea. And so this lady just walks up to me and she said, "My husband told me to give you these." And it was a pair of shoes, and they're 10 and a half, which is my size. And it was just like it was just a really beautiful moment, and it brightened the whole day.
Right. Trish, if you're listening, you're a godsend.
Yeah, I tried to find them at the end of the race. I couldn't find them. I wanted to give him my pair of shoes,
right.
In return.
Right.
But the other reason it was, I think, beautiful, we talk about always changing, and, your why stays the same, but, over time you might realize different things about it. And I realized during that race that it wasn't necessarily finishing faster or finishing in a certain place that matters the most to me. It's like the idea of pushing our limits and just seeing if we can do more. And so that race as a whole was a huge, I think, turning point in the way I view triathlon, because it's just about seeing what's possible. Right. And so it might be, can we go faster, but if something goes wrong, it's how do we deal with this, and can we figure a way out of it? Right.
Asking that question, how? And as human beings, we're pack oriented. We like being part of our wolf pack, our communities. There's different communities. Why do you like being part of the Ironman community?
I think it's just it's a community of people that doesn't believe in the impossible.
And for those out there, I mean, Anka legit wrote to Webster's dictionary to have that word removed from the dictionary. So I thought that was a hilarious side note.
That's an embarrassing story.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's you're very action oriented, and that's really admirable. How would you define the greatness?
I think it's a drive to always improve and get as close to your potential as you can every day. It's like a it's a it's like a will. It's like a will pulling you towards whatever your vision is of a better future self. And so for each person it's different, but I think each one of us can achieve greatness in whatever it is, that we're passionate about.
And what's the hardest part about that? You said that it's a drive, you get finding this will. Like, when did you find that will? Did it happen before you got started and it helped you get started? Did it amplify during it, or where did that will come from?
Well, I think we all have it. It's just sometimes our vision is clouded because we don't know what it is that we want to be great at. And so, but once we find it, then it takes care of itself.
There's this great story that I loved hearing and I loved talking about, how God is talking to one of his angels, and he goes, I want to give the human being the greatest gift ever, and that's potential, and then them striving for it. Where should I hide it? And the angel says, you put it at the bottom of the ocean. They'll never find it. All the way deep down. And they go, with technology and where things are going, I think they'll find it in a couple hundred years all the way at the bottom of the ocean. So that would be too easy. And angel goes, well, what about on the top of a mountain? Put it all the way at the top of the highest mountain. They'll never find it then. And God goes, you kidding me? There's some pretty strong and gritty people out there willing to take on any weather to get to the top of the mountain, and I'm sure they'll find it soon, so we can't put it there. And then God ponders for a second. He says, I got it. I'll put it inside them. They'll never find it there. And I think what you just said about us already having it inside of us and searching for outside sources rather than focusing on our breath. Control your breath, control your life, pay attention to yourself, listen to your own passions, and then those will drive you much further, and you'll find perseverance along the way as long as you continue to keep your why in mind. What are your thoughts on that? On that it's right there already.
I mean, like, I wholeheartedly agree. I couldn't have said it better.
So what's next for you? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to travel? And how are you going to get there? Are things going to stay the same? What will change, or what do you want to change?
Well, there's a quote I've been thinking about, because it's the beginning of a new season right now, and it goes, it never gets easier. You just go faster.
I love that.
And so, I mean, my first year in triathlon, my goal was to finish an Ironman. My goal last year was to, finish, see if I could go faster, which, it happened. And so I think now is kind of the point where, like, I mean, obviously was always serious about it, but we'll try to take it to the next level. And so, I mean,
that's the goal right there, and something that you and I touched throughout every time we went into my basement in high school to work out, and down in that little dungeon is what was the thing we hit on the way down the stairs? Do you remember the
Chase the Dream?
Chase the Dream, and that's what we've been doing for a long time, and we changed that to a new one, and that's something that we tap all the time, and is there's no traffic on the extra mile. What does that mean to you?
It means, I mean, everybody works, and most people work hard, but you can work hard enough that no one else is working as hard as you. And when you're there, you're all by yourself.
Exactly. And if you're sick and tired of the traffic, whether that's the physical traffic outside or the traffic in your mind, just be willing to go a little bit further. Get out in front of the pack, and go find where there is no traffic. And once you're there, I think you're going to be really excited, and you'll have this burning desire, and perseverance will become easy if that's possible, which I think it is. Perseverance becomes easy once you get further down the road.
Completely agree.
So I want to say thank you, not only for honestly chasing all your dreams with such a enthusiasm, and such a passion, and such an intensity that is really, really, really rare. But I also want to say on here that I love your style, the way you carry yourself, not only as my best friend, but the way you treat other people. I've been meeting your friends along the way, and they say the same thing. And everybody seems to say the same thing about you. It's just that you're the kindest guy you ever met. But I also one of the hardest working guys, and that's hard, right? Because those are kind of always at the end of each spectrum, right? The saint angel, and then the warrior killer, and you seem to find the balance in that really, really well, and I just appreciate you being able to flip that switch on and off, and I'm endlessly grateful to have you in my life.
Thank you for that, and I'd like to say that we are who we surround ourselves with, so all these things you're saying, it wouldn't be possible if it weren't for you, so thank you.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Appreciate it.